displays of affection. It's not about the ability of individuals to express their sexuality in a public forum or to feel comfortable with their own sexuality. It's about the ability of corporations and other actors in society to pick and choose those images and use them in ways that are almost exclusively manipulative, that are designed to get a particular reaction, and have nothing to do with normalising the ability of a man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, or a man and a man, to have those feelings and have those relations, and have everything to do with exploiting those for a corporate goal. We don't think that is a good way to normalise positive attitudes towards sex. To the extent to which it has any normalising effect on attitudes towards sex, it inevitably normalises attitudes that view partners in sex as objects, and as sexual toys or as objects of gratification and desire for one party and not the other. We think that is a substantial problem in this debate, and that is what we've set out to solve from opening government. I'm going to talk about positive material, about what we really do for gender equality at the moment. I want to deal with 2 points of rebuttal first. Firstly, what are corporations' incentives, and are they, for some reason, better than the state's incentives? And secondly, are we positing society? Firstly, we'd say that although Elle seemed to want to draw a contrast between corporations' incentives and the incentives of the state, she seemed to want to talk very little about whether there would be any possible negative incentives for the state in this debate. We don't think there are any. So it is true that corporations have really good incentives to create really good images that everyone likes and makes everyone feel comfortable. Then probably they would not be creating the kind of ads they're creating now. We don't see any incentive for the state to ban good and healthy and wholesome images of sexual relations, just not ones that are arousing ones that are the problem in this debate. We think those problems can be solved regardless of whether or not you have a state intervention. You don't need a sexually arousing image to normalise certain types of relationships. If you want to defend that, defend that. You don't need sexual arousing to it. But secondly, Elle said the reason corporations have a good incentive is they don't want to chase off customers. The response to that is that if that were the case, then a vast majority of the ads that are produced would not be produced. But the reason that men's shoe companies produce ads that treat women as sexual objects is they don't care about my opinion or Elle's opinion, because we're not their customer market. They don't alienate me, they don't change who purchases them, but they drastically appeal to the kind of men who they want to be buying their shoes. And that is all they need in order to have a successful ad. And so it doesn't matter what those corporations' incentives are. It is very clear that there are a set of corporations operating in society that are vastly incentivized to use me as a sexual object. And I think it is perfectly reasonable for a state to say that is not acceptable and that is worse for society. Second point of rebuttal, are we positing society? What Elle said is, we are saying that people cannot respond rationally to sexualized images. Newsflash, that's what corporations are banking on. That is exactly what corporations expect to happen when they put that out. Because the entire point of advertising is to make people respond irrationally and purchase something that they would not otherwise purchase on. The premise that advertising and sexual advertising is based on is that people don't respond rationally to those images, and we have decades of evidence that they don't do that. And that is why it is particularly important to restrict the ability of corporations to do that. We'd also say that's not a new thing. When we ban porn, when we stop people from accessing in their public sphere, we prevent people from showing sexualized movies on planes because you might expose people who don't want to see them. Every time we do that, we say people are not responding rationally, and that's problematic. Then she said we're creating a conception of shame associated with sex. This is not about public displays of affection. It's not about the ability of two individuals to say that they love each other or kiss in a public place. It's not about the ability of individuals to go to their private sphere and feel normal about doing it. It's about what happens when corporations are involved as the dominant actors in the portrayal of that in a public sphere. We think that promotes incredibly problematic conceptions about sex, which are far, far worse than shame. Yes?
Some of the most positive and progressive depictions of female sexuality come, for example, from niche artists who pick new forms of female sexuality and arousal. Are they also banned, or are you only limiting this to advertising now?
They are also banned, but we don't think we lose very much, because the reality is that the number of people who see sexualised images of a woman in a shoe ad are substantially higher than the number of women who go to feminist art galleries and view those images. If we have to lose those in order to lose the dominant problems that are causing the problems that those feminist artists are trying to deal with, we are very happy to make that sacrifice. Let's move on. Let's finally talk about the particular minorities and teens and individuals who might be particularly repressed that Elle wanted to talk about. We'd say that there are two types of individuals that fall within that. Firstly, those who genuinely don't want to be exposed to those images, who we think are substantially benefited by our side. But for those who are being forced into not exploring their sexuality by their parents or by their families, a culture of dominant display of sex dictated by corporations in our public sphere makes those families and those individuals and makes it far less likely that they're able to interact with people who might give them positive views. But moreover, for those who do have repressed attitudes about sexuality, exposing them to the kind of images that are produced by corporations only gives them a false picture of what sexuality is like, and is partially responsible for the way women are treated by those minorities when they do eventually go into sexual relationships and have those kind of relationships. We don't think that's a benefit on your side. Let's talk about our positive material. Let's talk about gender equality. I think the problem with gender equality is really genuinely hard to fix. We think it's infinitely more difficult to solve when you have a normalized view in society that women in particular are sexual commodities, that women are things that are used to sell products, and that viewing women as sexual is normal, and that is normal in a public sphere. We think this does three things. Firstly, it sets standards of expected female behaviour in public interactions. It sets standards of female dress. It sets standards of female attitudes towards other things. It sets an acceptance of sexualisation that you demand from the women that you interact with. And women who don't want to fit into that have a much harder time doing well in the workplace. It's why you can link the length of a woman's skirt to the amount of money that she is earning in her job. We think that is incredibly problematic, but that is actively promoted by a society that views women as sexual objects, not just in private and in pornography, where people are purchasing that explicitly for a sexual means. And here's the real distinction. In public, where you are viewing that as something that is normalised by society and accepted by society and viewed as the standard of women in society. And that is the real distinction between porn and just generally sexualised images. That one is public and publicly recognised and publicly displayed, and when you see it, you think that all women are more likely to be like that and should be like that. We think the second thing you do is you set a standard of accepted female behaviour in the private sphere, that when women go into relationships, they are viewed as more submissive and more likely to be viewed as a passive partner. We think those kind of problems are substantial. They are problems that need to be fixed. And more importantly, they are problems that can't be fixed while the actors that set views of sexual norms in society are the corporations buying the ad slots. We're happy with PDAs, we're not happy with those ads. We're happy to